Thanks.
Pray every day for a dead win. Well,
yeah. Thanks.